Good morning. Sorry, started that with a sniff. Good morning, good morning. Um, it's Conversations with Compassion. It's season 2. I took a break over January, February, March, when we're obviously into April. And I've set up some lovely, amazing guests over the next few weeks to talk to us about compassion, its meaning for them, and giving inspiration for anybody out there that is needing to think about connecting with themselves more. So if you don't know me, my name's Helen Ferguson and I'm a specialist trauma therapist, and I guide women to liberation, to emotional and psychological liberation from trauma. And just a reminder that trauma is any experience that causes your emotional overwhelm, an emotional imbalance and a psychological imbalance, and physiologically you'll feel that too. So I specialise in childhood attachment developmental trauma and sexual abuse. So I set up Conversations with Compassion, if you've not been on one of these before, to bring bring it out there, bring it into conversation so that it's not seen, because I hear often from people that it's self-indulgent, it's lazy, it's self-pity, it's egotistical, it's narcissistic. I've heard that one too, and they don't have time for it. And last year I had amazing women, entrepreneurial women, talking about their journey into self-compassion. And so I wanted to continue the conversation. And so this morning I have the amazing Louisa with us, who is going to do a far better introduction of herself than I would. So Louisa, welcome to Conversations with Compassion. Thank you so much for giving us the time.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here.
Do you want to take just a minute or two to explain who you are, what you do, and where you are in the world? Because I've had guests in different countries, so where you are and what you do.
Okay. So I'm Louisa Whitney and I'm a family mediator. So what that means is that I help couples who are separating to come together and talk about what happens next, with a view to creating a resolution that's tailor-made to them and their children. So it's not a kind of, well, our cousins did this or something and we'll just do what they did. It's really about looking at their needs and putting something in place that's going to work for them. It's not easy to have those discussions, but setting up that calm, empathetic space where they can have constructive conversations is really important, and it helps to move things forward. I'm based in Dorking in Surrey in the UK, but most of my work since the pandemic has been online. I'm seeing clients in person again, but mostly it's online. So that's where I am today.
Do you think that's quite a tricky piece to do online? I realise that's not a compassion question, but I was just kind of thinking that particular piece of work that you're describing. I remember being in, when I worked in child and adolescent mental health, being in child protection meetings, and at that point I'm trying to think what they called it, but there was like a mediation bit before the child protection bit. I can't remember what it's called now. I've got perimenopausal brain. And I can imagine trying to do that online is quite difficult, because there is something about the connection that you have with people in the room.
It definitely, I think there are challenges. I think for some people it really depends on if you're someone that is used to working through video, and obviously a lot of people got more used to that during the pandemic. So before the pandemic, the amount of work I did online was tiny. It was usually only where people were in different places and so needed it to be online because they couldn't get into the room. But obviously during the pandemic, it could only happen online. And most people are wanting to stay online. The only people that don't like being online are people that just don't really do that in their working life, or because they don't work, or because they are retired. And in which case, then they prefer to be in the room. I think there's something to be said for people being in an environment where they feel comfortable. And so if you are in a safe space that is a comforting home for you, then it's a lot easier to talk about things rather than being in somebody else's space, which can feel strange. So that can be reassuring for some people.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that I've noticed as well with therapy, how much more comfortable people are. I remember before the pandemic, that actually I was working with somebody here in France, and they were moving back to the UK. So they didn't I gave them the option of online, and they were like, oh no, I need to be in the room with someone. And then of course, about 2 months later, the pandemic hit. But there was this real reluctance to the idea of being online. And now, as a therapist, it's actually been quite extraordinary to see how people have engaged online in therapy. And, I was doing it anyway. I've worked online for quite a long time, but, now it's like 95% of my work is online. It's quite unusual for me to see somebody in the room, as it were. So anyway, it was just an off-topic conversation, but I thought it was a really, I just kind of, I do this, I kind of have, spark of question. So today, so I don't throw you with any more different questions. It would be really, really lovely if you could explain what self-compassion means for you, because it's, it's often you see it kind of interchangeable with self-love, and they are quite different. So, what does self-compassion mean for you?
I think it means two main things to me. One is talking to yourself kindly and giving yourself a break. So there is that kind of, if you make a mistake, it's okay. If you screw something up, forget something, get a time wrong, it's okay. And not going down the route of berating yourself. And the other part of it is making time for your own needs and prioritizing yourself, so that you're not constantly putting other people first and scheduling endless work meetings in because you want to help other people whilst depleting yourself because you haven't got 5 minutes to draw a breath and things like that. So I think that kind of talking to yourself more kindly, which has very much been a journey for me, and the whole just giving yourself space and the voice to prioritize your own needs are the most important parts of it.
You said about, sorry, excuse me. You said about it's been a journey for you. Was there a kind of pivotal moment or experience that made you think, actually, I've got to go on this journey. I've got to start this journey of connecting with me and talking to myself differently, and allow and prioritizing my needs, identifying them and responding to them?
Yeah, very much so. I sort of look at my life as kind of when I was introduced to basic self-compassion, and then when I got to kind of advanced levels of self-compassion, or started that, I think it's probably fairer to say. So I had a breakdown in 2003 because my previous job was as a family lawyer, and I'd wanted to be a solicitor since I was 12. It was something I was very focused on. I was going to right the wrongs of the world, as you'd seen on the telly. And the journey was really bruising. I applied for 100 training contracts, didn't get any of them, got into my first job and was like, well, you've got to make this work, otherwise you failed. So I genuinely didn't know that I could say either no to things at work, or I can't do that yet, or can I do that next week? And I just burnt myself into the ground because it was just the constant, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll keep doing that. And it just got to the point where I couldn't go to work anymore. I was just tired. I was irritable. And it was a real journey of learning that it's okay to prioritize your own needs and to speak your own needs, and that you haven't failed. And as part of that learning process, I discovered that I was a highly sensitive person, and that led to me realizing the need for self-compassion was stronger than ever, really.
It certainly is. And I was just kind of listening to your experience and wondering if, not only was there an internal expectation and hope that you had to drive yourself forward, but also a kind of societal one, a cultural one, do you think? Or was that not present, do you think? Because it's, just thinking about the world that the work environment that you were going into, the expectations of that.
I definitely think so. I think there was a kind of expectation that I perceived from family, which I actually think wasn't there, that, you've paid for this education, been through university, done a postgraduate course. That felt like a big pressure that you couldn't waste that level of investment. But I also think, all of my friends were also doing the whole, we were living in London, we were all starting careers, we were going out of work. You know, there was a real kind of, we're all successful, we all do these things. And I think there was definitely that kind of perception that you didn't want to be the one that somehow didn't make it.
So you didn't want to be the one that was perceived as failing.
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah. And do you think your friends would have seen you as failing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the incredibly ironic thing is that most of my friends, particularly from university, have all pivoted in their careers and are now doing different things to what they did when they came out of university, which I think is quite common as things unfold and, you know, you discover more about who you are. I mean, my son's doing his GCSEs next year, and we have conversations where he says to me, I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I'm like, why would you know? You know, given your age, do what you're interested in, then do some more stuff of what you're interested in and let it evolve. This idea that you've got to choose at 16 one career and jump into it for the rest of your life is just, you know, it's not borne out in reality, apart from the fact that it's just a huge pressure.
It's a massive pressure. You know, and I recall it myself, you know, that sense of, or, you know, what everybody around me seemed to know what they were going to do at that age. And I was like, I don't know. Not entirely sure. And, you know, I'd had an idea about going into business management, and I'd had an idea about doing something else. And, you know, I kind of always understood that I wanted to I've got a very caring nature, and I like looking after people, and I'm empathic. I'm intuitively empathic. And so it was like, well, you know, what do I want? And I went to university and the first time and kind of pivoted. I prefer your word. I didn't fail, but I pivoted because I was there and I was going, I'm like, I don't even want to be here. None of this is making sense to me. So, you know, I left, and then I went back home, and I spent a bit of time thinking about what I wanted to do. And that's when I went and did my psychiatric nursing, and that was what I started out doing. But then didn't stay in that either, became the therapist that I am. I was like, oh, constantly pivoting and doing this. And I always like to dip into different things. So it's a really interesting time in life that, you know, that age when there's this expectation that we're gonna, you know, right, that's the path. These are the decisions that you've got to make right now. And not in any of that time are people saying to you, understand what you need, and these are the tools in which you can use to do that. You know, and self-compassion is one of those that absolutely has to be there at that crucial age in life, to actually really understand who you are. Self-awareness and self-acceptance, you know, are kids being taught that? You know, I occasionally still work with children, and that's massively part of what I do. But where is it? So we're being asked to make, or children and young people are being asked to make decisions about their future, but they don't even know who they are.
Yeah. And you've got to know who you are before you can know what it is you want to do.
Exactly. Exactly. So anyway, slightly, it wasn't off topic, but it's a really important aspect, because it drives, you know, and you know, thinking about some of the women that I've worked with over the last year, 2 years, probably, is listening to them around that time in their life, where there was, you know, a high level of uncertainty. And they you know, they're like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, but it's still a recollection for them. So it's a really important time. So going back to your journey into self-compassion, and the kind of the pivotal moment that where you were like, oh no, hang on, something's got to change. We've got somebody saying good morning, but it's a Facebook user, so I can't actually see who it is, because it's not giving me the name, and I don't have my phone on to be able to check who's the Facebook user. So Facebook user, just let us know who you are. I'm suspecting perhaps someone, Sarah or Julie. So yeah, let me know who it is. And so your journey, what were some of the obstacles to you? What are some of the obstacles do you think that you overcame to be able to start embracing self-compassion?
I think one of them was definitely unpicking the kind of expectations that I had either perceived people had of me or assumed people had of me, and actually really starting to understand them. Because often there was this kind of like, well, you've got to keep going, you've got to keep going. But if you pare it back and you say, well, why? What happens if you don't? And unpicking those, counselling was certainly really helpful for me. I remember the counsellor saying to me, do you ever say no? And I was like, what do you mean, do I ever say no? Of course I don't say no. Why would you not say no? As a teen, I was told you say no to drugs. I probably gathered from various things that if somebody wanted you to do something on a kind of sexual basis, you said no. Yeah. But in other places, saying no, particularly if it was somebody older than you or someone more senior in an office. So that was a really big journey that came out through the counselling, that kind of idea of being able to say no and of actually looking at if there is an expectation upon you, who's put it there and why is it there? And actually what I found was that a lot of the things that I thought other people expected of me weren't true. And I was kind of working with this whole pressure that was just unrealistic and unhelpful, really.
Because what you were able to start to understand was that we actually have a responsibility to ourselves to define our boundaries that are aligned with our values, and we often don't really kind of sit down often and go, well, these are my values. I support women to do that in their therapy with me, but it's we know, like you're right, nobody teaches us, nobody guides through. I mean, I think part of education should be around boundaries, not just the sexual boundaries of if somebody tries to touch you, but actually your own moral boundaries and what you, not only what you need from other people and want from other people, but what you need and want from yourself. And what you're describing is very much a kind of going into these circumstances. And I think we're both of a similar age where, we were probably brought up saying, don't challenge the hierarchy. And I remember going into the workplace and did challenge the hierarchy and was trying to be brought down for it. So I'm quite a strong woman. I just chose to pivot somewhere else. But it was, there are still boundaries. There's a self-respect that we have to uphold, and going into workplaces where, we've got that idea that we can't challenge what's in front of us. We have to fit in. We have to slot in. Is disempowering.
And, I genuinely didn't know until I was probably 24, 25, that you could have boundaries and that it was okay to have boundaries and that it was okay to say, that doesn't work for me. I have needs, that doesn't meet my needs. And that kind of learning to speak up and to voice things, that I think that is a very difficult journey, particularly if you are a bit of a people pleaser and you want people to like you, and ultimately you just want to say yes because you don't want people to take against you effectively. I wanted to be liked by everybody.
And I get that. I mean, sorry, my dogs are really going. I don't know whether you can hear them from here, but they're really shouting in the garden, and I'm kind of like, I'm a bit concerned that they're going to annoy people, as in on listening to us now. So hopefully they're not interrupting your listening. But I was just looking at what Teresa has said there. It's the Facebook user is Teresa. She's let us know. And she said it can take time and with age to work out who we are. And of course, this changes. And that's absolutely right, Teresa, because we are constantly changing. We shouldn't stay the same, because we should be learning and growing through our experiences. transforming through those experiences, and transitioning and transforming through those experiences. Sorry, Teresa. Then there's a couple of other Facebook users, and I can't see who is who. Teresa's just saying that's not her. So I don't know. There's like 10 Facebook users that are commenting, and I don't know who each of them are. So anyway, sorry, Teresa, it wasn't you, but it was a really good statement to make, that because actually, yes, we are and should be continuously changing, more not changing, but transitioning, transforming and transitioning through every kind of experience that we have, even the unpleasant experiences, and through that we get to learn more about ourselves. We get to be able to connect with who we are. That comment was from Sharid. Thank you for Sharid for a great comment. So, we have to be able to be aware of ourselves and accepting of who we are, and self-compassion is part of that. In fact, you can't reach self-acceptance without being self-compassionate. Yeah. So it's a hugely important process. So how do you kind of manage now to incorporate your self-compassion to make sure it still happens for you in the busy life and the busy profession? I mean, I'm sure you have a busy family life too, but your family life, your professional life, because it's demanding. What you're doing is hugely demanding, and it can be really easy to kind of get embedded and focused, and lose sight of what's in here. So how do you manage now to maintain your self-compassion? Because I always say this, and I said it to you before we came on live, that self-compassion isn't a destination, it's a continuing journey. So how are you continuing on your self-compassion journey?
And that's something I've struggled with. I'm very much like, well, I want to get to the destination. I don't want to look out the window. I want to be at that point that I want to be at. And on a very practical level, I'm a big believer that you just put things in your diary. So I have reminders, go for a walk. I do a regular yoga class every week. It's in the diary, so I don't schedule stuff in. On a sort of less practical level, one of the things I've learned is that I really have to tune into me. So if I feel irritable, or if I'm feeling like I am getting a bit low, it's those kind of flags, or I've stopped sleeping well. It's those kind of flags that something is going on here. We need to just clear the decks, really pay attention, what's going on, what's happening, what needs to change. And it very much is evolving, because what really used to help and light me up 3 years ago is not necessarily what works now. And I think I'm very much in a phase of transition at the moment, of trying to look at, right, the way that I'm working is not necessarily working the best for me. What would work better, and trying to kind of work that out. And I don't really have a very clear vision about that at the moment. So it's been a real journey exercise in terms of, okay, well, I think this could help, so let's just take a little step and do that, and just trust that that is putting you on the journey, even if you can't see the destination. So that's evolving at the moment, and I'm kind of excited to see where that takes me, really.
Brilliant. Well, maybe we need to have you on again to catch up with where you are in that journey. We need a Louisa part 2 so that we can hear that. Because it is really interesting. I think, what you're saying is right, that, what worked for us 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, might not necessarily be right for us now. And I know 4 years ago, I couldn't meditate. Well, it wasn't I couldn't meditate. I just didn't understand what I was supposed to be doing, because I'm very analytical. So I was literally trying to meditate, thinking, what should I be thinking?
Yeah.
It's like, should I be trying to get rid of all of these thoughts? Because my brain is constant. It's quite, it's quite hard sometimes, I think, for people to be in conversation with me, and just generally, because I'll be like, because I'll go from one topic to the other, and I know where I'm going, but it's just you know, I know there's one friend of mine that says it's brilliant, H, because I never know where we're going to get to. But it's fascinating, you know. So meditation for me was something that I really, really struggled with. And then once I researched it and once I started, I did particular training in it, and now I provide meditation. That, you know, I got to understand that it wasn't about trying to get rid of what was in my mind, but was to actually be present with myself and allow those thoughts and let them be there, but let them not be so intrusive that I don't focus on me. So I kind of see them as clouds. They're just drifting when I'm in meditation, and my breathing is then able to go to a lovely kind of regulatory level. So but I wasn't able to do that 4 years ago. And I probably would have scoffed a little bit, probably 4 years ago. I'd be like, I haven't got time for meditation. What are you talking about? I'll just go for a nice walk instead. And now I get to do both. I get to do, you know, lots of things that are connected with mindfulness and kind of that self-soothing, activating the autonomic nervous system so that, you know, it brings a regulation, brings a balance for me. So, you know, you're absolutely right. It does shift and change. So something that works for you today or something that resonates with you today could change on your journey, the journey that you're talking about, and into something else in time.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, and you know, it's exciting. It's exciting to see where as things unfold, but it's also sitting with that uncertainty of like, well, I don't know where I'm going to be in a year's time or doing things, and there's a part of me that's like, oh, I don't like that.
No, I'm with you on that. I do have a 20-year plan in my head, which scares my husband no end, because he's like, do I factor into this 20-year plan? And I'm like, of course you do. But, you know, it's like, but that 20-year plan, I mean, it could change. You know, there are so many. I thought I was going to be in France forever, and I'm not. So I'm moving back to the UK at the end of April. No, end of May. We are at the end of April. Panicked myself then. At the end of May, and you know, we are both, my husband and I, Fergie. We both said we know that's not going to be forever. You know, but it could be. You know, but we're not aiming for it to be forever. We want to actually retire back to Greece. But it's, you know, there's so many differentials that happen in life that you can't 100% say this is where I'm going to be, this is where I'm going to end up. But if you can be compassionate to yourself on that journey and listen like you are to what you need, what your body's telling you, what your mind is telling you, you know, so because you'll feel it first, you'll feel it in your body first before you are able to kind of verbalize it, that, you know, it'll be you'll be regulated and balanced on that journey, and you'll be able to welcome more things in, welcome different aspects of self-compassion in.
Yeah, I very much resonate with that. And sometimes it is just about knowing you're not in the right place to just relax, let stuff go, so that then stuff can come in. And you know, Nevermore this week, we're in the process of trying to move house, and it is enormously stressful. And there have, you know, been moments this week where things have overwhelmed me and I've just kind of had to let it go. And that's when you get the waves of the kind of, okay, this is where we need to be. This is what I need to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can connect with those, if you can make sure that you don't lose sight of what's being said to you from yourself, then you won't lose yourself in the process. You know, because emotional overwhelm and burnout is about disconnecting from yourself too. Just to, you know, it's been an amazing conversation, and I actually am serious about having a part 2. But do you what would you, if there was somebody listening and they're kind of really struggling with starting to think and, you know, think about self-compassion, or they're listening to their self-criticism and their self-judgment and feeling like they're failing, you know, and you having had that experience in your working life, is there a piece of advice, if there's one kind of tip or piece of advice, what do you think, you know, would you be able to share it? I mean, I realize I'm putting you on the spot, but
I think the thing I'd share is that if you're talking to yourself in a way that you would never talk to a friend or a sibling or a family member, then that's something that I think it's helpful to kind of get a bit more curious about. And if you can move to trying to talk to yourself in the same compassionate way that you would if a friend asked you for advice, or, you know, your sister or brother said, I'm having a hard time, that can be the start of just turning things around and just changing that internal dialogue. And for me, that has definitely been really important. And I can't say that I never go into that, oh, you stupid woman, what have you done that for mode. But actually, it's learning to pick it up more quickly and go, well, hang on a minute. Right, let's just be a bit kinder.
Yeah, brilliant. Beautiful piece of advice. Beautiful. So if anybody were to need your services or want to find out more about what you do, where would they find you, Louisa?
So my website is lkwfamilymediation.co.uk, or I'm on pretty much all of the main social media channels. My practice, LKW Family Mediation, has a Facebook page. I'm on Instagram as louisa.whitney.1. I'm on Twitter as Louisa Whitney. Come and find me, say hello. I'm always happy for anyone to reach out in a private message. I know how difficult separation is. So if you're struggling with anything, just drop me a message. I've got free downloads that might help, or I can point you in the direction of something else that might.
Oh, that's brilliant. Brilliant. And I'll make, if you can give me perhaps a link to those downloads, I'll be able to put them in the comments once we've finished recording. But if anybody is out there and they are struggling, if you're a woman and identify as a woman and you're struggling out there, you know, I do have a free community, a nurturing free community where I am, and Louisa is part of it, where I am supporting, guiding, prompting women to connect with themselves again, to connect with that self-compassion, to bring that awareness back to who they are, what they're doing, and how to continue or begin on their self-compassionate journey. So if you are interested in being part of that community, you can find it on Facebook as the Self-Compassion Circle for Women, and you'd be more than welcome. So that's my gift to you at the end of this session, is that ability to kind of be guided and supported by me and my expert knowledge and skills. So Louisa, it has been a lovely, lovely conversation. Thank you so much for giving the time this morning. I know you were very squeezed for time today, so I'm like hugely appreciative of the fact that you were able to do this. We've had some comments, you know, this is so good. Wow, emotional overwhelm is a disconnection from oneself. Awesome. So it's been a really inspirational conversation. So I just want to thank you again for the insight into you and your experiences and sharing, you know, with courage and bravery too. So thank you.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. It's a brilliant conversation to have.
Well, part 2 we will arrange. Well, I think we'll wait until you've moved and I've moved. We'll let that happen. Oh, well, everyone, you have a fantastic day, and thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And I will be back next week with 2 weeks time with another Conversations with Compassion. They're going to run fortnightly. Last year they were weekly, but I've need to breathe in between, so it's fortnightly. So have a wonderful day, everyone. You know, if you're needing to connect with compassion, just listen to yourself. Listen to what you need in here. Okay. With love and compassion from me and from Louisa, I'm going to say, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all soon.